Here we are, another Friday broadcast coming to you today with some really interesting insights that I discovered this week on what's happening in the world of research papers. We got to talk about this because AI generated research papers are real. It's a thing. And that's not all. In fact, what we're seeing is a tremendous shift in the way that we're thinking about doing research, the way that we're actually doing research, and all of the processes that we've built for conducting the sharing, creation, and otherwise work around research papers. It's been a really interesting week. I have a lot of really fantastic sources that I get my own information from. As you might guess, there's quite a lot of things happening in AI today. 2024 has been so much more interesting than even 2023, or reaching all the way back to 2022 with the release of ChatGPT. Let's talk about this next era of research papers. Welcome to AI Mistakes. I'm Daniel Lemire, your host, and it's a delight to be with you today. Really glad to have those of you join us on the live stream. This is a live stream, so if you've got a comment or a question, drop that in, whichever service you happen to be on. I'm just really glad to be here to have this conversation because this is something I've kind of put off a little bit. I had it on my agenda for a while, but this week a few things happened that really drove me to cover this topic around the next era of research papers. And the first of those that I have to share with you is that one of the sources I get my information from, a really great follow on Twitter or LinkedIn. Social media's got a lot of personalities, but one of my favorites is a professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Professor Ethan Mollick shares a lot of really great content, and he's actually recently written a book about where we are with AI and how it's really changing the way that we do work. And while I haven't finished the book, I did buy it, and I found it quite interesting. So if you're looking for a good book on AI that's not written by AI, let me suggest Ethan's book. But what I saw this week was Ethan produces a regular newsletter, and I'll put a link to his newsletter in the comments if it's something that you're interested in. I have a newsletter as well. I'd love for you to be reading the AI Mistakes newsletter, so give us a subscribe to that if you want to keep up on AI news. Got all kinds of great things that we're covering there. But back to the topic at hand, this next era of research papers. Well, Ethan is a professor. He does research. He does research paper review as his job. His day job is writing research and educating all sorts of brilliant people on the use of technology to achieve business purposes. He's part of the business school, and one of the reasons I like the things that Ethan writes a lot is he's very much focused on business and innovation, and that's something that I've been focused on in my career. In fact, really got passionate about innovation and the next thing in technology all the way back in my grad school days at university. I took a course on emerging technologies, and that was very impactful to my career. And in fact, what I'm going to share with you right now actually has a lot to do with what I learned in that course. It was quite a long time ago, so I have to be honest. It's going to seem a little dated when I show it to you, but that's okay. We're going to have fun with this. You just have to find the right button to push on the screen to change my display here. But basically, what I'm going to share with you, we're going to do a live usage of Perplexity.ai, which is one of my favorite AI tools. This week, they've introduced an entirely new feature, and it allows you to write and publish a paper. And this is important because what I'm about to show you is how far we have come in this modern age of AI. So if I throw this up on the screen here, what you're looking at is a Word document. This Word document is from my education as a graduate student at the University of North Texas Yes, that's right. I have kept all of my work from so many years ago. This was all the way back in the fall of 2007. And as a part of the course curriculum, when I took this course on emerging technologies, one of our assignments was to do an individual technology assessment. And we were given a set of questions that we could use in writing the paper. So you can see a lot of those questions are here in the paper. And of course, this is just the page that shows you, the reference, the table of contents. I'll just thumb through this for you to look at briefly on the screen. I haven't looked at this paper in, well, really since I turned it in. And what's cool about a paper like this is because we were doing a technology that was already mature at the time of writing the paper, these details were already pretty well established. The research work here was digging up these details, finding the references, taking an opinion, and sharing your thoughts in the paper to be graded by the professor and or the professor's team. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to ask Perplexity, with the use of its advanced AI capabilities, to write this paper for me. I'm basically giving it a prompt that asks for it to write the paper. The prompt is saying, be succinct, answer these questions, and we're going to watch it in real time run through this prompt. Now, full disclosure, I am using the version of Perplexity that includes the co-pilot, the professional level, and it comes with certain benefits. And I found that to be incredible for doing research. But let's just watch what Pro does in Perplexity. And then I'll show you one of the really cool things that you can do with this new feature that Perplexity has made available. Now, as it's running through and doing this, Pro Search is doing what I would really consider to be a more agentic version of research. It's broken down the prompt into multiple steps. It has determined what those steps are that it needs to perform. And it's doing searches and consuming the results from those searches as it is building its response. Now, I don't know exactly what the context window is behind Perplexity, but I can tell you that it must be pretty substantial because the answers we get back with this kind of a question are pretty substantial. I mean, it is taking in a lot of information to bring us these results. What's cool about this is it doesn't take very long at all for this kind of a question to be answered. And to a significant degree, having the right prompt, having the right questions to ask in submitting this to Perplexity is really the game changer behind this technology because it is able to use all of that information in how you ask it, and it's going to write a response. Now, this is going to come back and share some details. It's going to build a timeline like I've asked it to with some key points. It's pulled out Cousteau and Gagnen's Aqualung. That was really where my timeline started. It went all the way back to 1530 and the introduction of the diving bell. Now it's outlining the initial problems with the technology, the old technology that was there. Then it's hooking into those causation factors that I asked it for. Innovators like Cousteau, military needs, and of course, the idea of exploring the world. And if you've read any science fiction, you've probably come across some exploration undersea. So definitely some inspiration from science fiction there. Now it's moving into section 4, where it's talking about the public reaction. Now, some of these responses, of course, are not worthy of a research paper, but I think you're starting to get the idea that I'm going for here. And that is that what we're looking at is the ability of AI to provide some really insightful information to us at the click of a button. I mean, this is really, really incredible. And what Perplexity introduced this week is the ability to convert it to a page. When I click the button for it to convert it to a page, what it's actually going to do for us is it's going to turn this into more of a publication, and it's going to write it for us. It's going to take what I gave it and turn it into more of an article with subsections. It's going to cover those details. It's going to explain the technology as if a beginner perhaps were reading the information and learning about the technology. As you can see, it has modified what I asked it for, but it's also providing relevant information, and it's bringing that together in a paper. And all of this is happening in real time. It's very quick, and the answers are pretty darn good. And I think that this feature is really very much inspired by the work that Perplexity has been doing with their Discover capability. And I've mentioned this before on the program, but what Perplexity's been doing is finding information and stories that people are interested in based on a number of factors that they are considering. And they are sharing those stories as if it were news, but written by their AI capability. So they're turning these into pages in order to write the actual news. So here we have the Mistral release of CodeStrel. This is a big news item for this week, and I've made the decision to cover the research paper side of things rather than the news coming out about this release of Mistral. This is a really interesting and relevant story, but I'm not going to cover it today. We're going to keep talking about this research paper thing because I find this to be really exciting. The fact that you can, with the few clicks of a button, create an article and share that with the world. I'm going to publish it with you right here. There, now it's published. A technology assessment paper on scuba. Just like that, it's out there and available for the world to see. And it's copied the link. I'll put it down below in the comments if that's something that you're interested in taking a look at. But back to Ethan's newsletter that I wanted to share with you. He wrote up some really good thoughts about what's happening with research. So I'm going to use what I read in Ethan's newsletter to sort of color some of my commentary, but I think there's even more to talk about than Ethan covers in his letter. I really like the approach that he took, this concept of the singularity, where everything changes because of how we see the world. And that, of course, has been applied to the world of AI from the world of physics in talking about the advent of black holes and time. And from a singularity in the AI world, that basically means what it looks like when AI reaches and exceeds the level of human intelligence and capability. So he's written up a number of key points, and I'm going to kind of riff on this a little bit. But I wanted you to see the paper, and I wanted you to understand that there's a lot of really insightful things that he's gonna talk about in his newsletter. But I'm going a slightly different direction. So here's where I'm coming at to begin the discussion. The first is, we know that it is going to be a thing for all of us to be using AI day in and day out. So the very first change that we're already seeing is that research papers that are written by students are in large part very much helped by the advent of AI. And in fact, I have been an advocate of using AI to do that work. I mean, let's go back to our Perplexity search here. I mean, this is a really good jumping off point, no matter how you slice it. I think there's a lot of benefit to putting this kind of research at the fingertips of somebody that is trying to learn about a new technology. The problem with using AI to do the research, of course, is that you don't have to work for it. And there is an amount of need of research so that you can understand the topic that you're chasing, right? I mean, doing AI generation of the research paper is not going to teach you anything. And this is the first problem that we have to address. So the bad news is that it is absolutely possible to fall into the trap and turn your brain off and not learn anything. But I think I hope that someone that is paying literal thousands of dollars for a university education hopefully is going to have a little bit of perspective and focus on what they can learn through the experience rather than simply clicking a button and trying to turn that in. And in fact, one of the reasons I really like what Ethan has to share is that he was one of the very first folks that I saw making the argument that AI needed to be brought into the classroom. And in fact, very early on, in fact, nearly immediately after the release of ChatGPT in the semester that began in the year 2023, Professor Mollick required his students to use AI. In fact, really doubled or probably quadrupled the amount of work that each student was responsible for. And the only way that they could deliver that amount of work, of course, was to use AI to supplement what they were doing so they could write more, so that they could do more research and have much better value, because that's the universe that we're going to live in. Someone that tries to do this level of work without the assistance of AI is going to be very challenged, because it is a lot of work. And with the aid of AI, we can do some really fantastic things. But there's more to it than simply, is it okay to use AI in writing the research paper? Because what we have is a twofold problem. On the one hand, if you're using an AI model to help write your information, it could be ill-informed. It could be a not very good model. It could be given sources of information that are unreliable, and depending on the model, you could get hallucinations. Nowadays, it is becoming even more interesting to have the discussion about hallucinations reference what happened in the news with Google a week ago. In fact, some say the AI capability feature that Google plugged into their search engine was filled with hallucinations. I take a little different approach to that and say, no, it wasn't filled with hallucinations. It was actually 100% accurate. It just had some bad sources of information. And this is really where we get to the crux of the problem. When it comes to a tool like Perplexity, the really great thing is that it conducts searches. It finds the relevant information, and then it uses that relevant information in generating the answer. And of course, if the searches that it does to find the right answers are not good sources of information, we have a problem, because garbage in, garbage out is exactly what you're going to get. So it's not just a matter of, is AI doing the writing, but where is the information coming from? Where is the data? Because data is key to using these AI capabilities to maximum effect. But there's more to it than that, because with the more advanced models like GPT-4 Omni, what you see happening is the writing is actually really very good. And it continues to improve. The likes of GPT-4 Omni are writing really clear prose. And in some cases, it exceeds an average human's ability to do that writing. With tools like Perplexity, not only can I have it written, but I can actually choose the model I want to use to do the writing. I could have the entire article rewritten right now with Claude Opus. Now, it's going to redo all of those searches. It's going to find that information again, and it's going to write it with a different AI model. What's great about this is that as a researcher, I can actually see multiple different ways that the story could be covered, the way that it could be written. And that's going to help me get better at doing the job of writing. And that's a key differentiator in the world of AI research, because it's not just a matter of how is it generated, because I got to be honest, if I'm going to turn in a research paper, I'm not just going to copy and paste the answer that I get from here, especially if I've got a syllabus that's demanding a very specific set of things. You know, a statement like explain your reasoning is going to have to be a little more in depth than the answer I'm going to get out of Perplexity or an average large language model. But it's probably going to give me some really great clues to plug into that outline to make it a good paper to start from. In fact, I think the exciting thing here is that I've got a draft to start with almost immediately. I can get over the blank page problem that is really a critical issue for me almost immediately by being able to plug this into a large language model. So there's some really great things to think about in terms of the paper actually being generated. And what's cool about this is that if you have someone that's not very good at communicating, this can be a really big help. Because the truth is, a lot of researchers are doing some incredible work out there, but maybe they're not great at communicating that information. And that's where using AI as a research assistant is pretty great. I mean, I'm just going to riff on where we are with Perplexity because it's my favorite AI tool right now because I can switch models and it's going to do the writing for me. It's going to help me organize the information. It's even going to find some great pictures and illustrations to help me understand what's going on. It's a multimedia experience. In fact, in those days, all the way back in the early 2000s, when I was taking this graduate education course, I was actually using a computer in the classroom in front of me. While the professor was teaching, I could look up terms and read supplemental information during the lecture. That was incredibly valuable. And this really takes that to the next level because it finds all of the relevant information and it brings it directly to me. Now, that's not all, though, when we talk about doing the work of being a research assistant. So what do I mean by that? Well, what we have today with the more advanced capabilities, and ChatGPT is a really great example. If I pull up ChatGPT, it is amazing the amount of data work that you can do with these kinds of capabilities. I showed in a recent video doing some price comparisons. And when I gave it the prompt for it to do this kind of work, I asked it to go and find the data. It did the data analysis for me and provided that summary with just a simple prompt. And it did all of the work of a data scientist. Now, albeit this is a very simple example, we're not talking about thousands of data points. But if you fed in a data file with thousands of data points to ChatGPT, it's going to do a lot of that work for you. And it's pretty amazing how much it can really help out. In fact, one of the things that Professor Mollick brought up and shared in his newsletter was the fact that sometimes today we have a challenge in academia because there's a sponsor behind the paper or there's a premise, a hypothesis that the author is most concerned with proving. Well, you can cherry pick the data to prove that hypothesis. But with the research assistant that can actually analyze the data, you could be completely hands-off on that process. Let the statistical analysis and the numerical trends be recognized by AI as a research assistant to help flag and identify those critical points that are coming out in the experimentation and the data as things are conducted. So I think the data aspect of this is absolutely relevant and important. But there's more to it than that because we are building incredibly complex systems today. We have more sensors and data to parse than ever before, and that is not slowing down. In fact, with the advent of the Internet of Things, there are more data points for us to consume on a regular basis, and being able to ingest all of that information and glean insights from it is a significant amount of work. With the advent of AI, we can take in even more data. We can study it in totally different ways. And one of those totally different ways is the use of video. Now, when I'm done having this live conversation, I can actually feed this entire YouTube video back into an AI and ask it for insights on how I could have done a better job in presenting the material, how I could be more thorough in what I present and what I say and what I'm putting on the screen. So you see, we need not have an Internet of Things in order to have good data sources to provide in using with research. All it takes is a video feed. And in fact, there are some researchers that are doing exactly this, and they're writing papers about how we can leverage these new models, omni models that are able to consume video and audio and all sorts of other inputs and do something useful with it. So being able to leverage the AI not only in collecting the information, but also in analyzing it to produce it as a part of the research work is a pretty incredible advantage that must not be understated. I think it's really going to change a lot. And I think the use that Professor Mollick has of this term is really relevant, right? We are in the middle of a major shift. And when we talk about review, right, I can review this video with the aid of AI. Well, the same is true of a research paper. Whether you're writing it yourself or leveraging the assistance of an AI model to write the paper, being able to quickly review the research is a pivotal thing. Now, here's what's interesting, and I wasn't aware of this before Ethan wrote his newsletter earlier in this week. It turns out that one of the data points he shared is that when the paper is written by AI, an AI reviewer prefers the AI written content. Isn't that interesting? Now, there's some research out there, and I'm not going to go deep into it right now, but essentially what we've discovered is that the AI models, several of them, are actually able to recognize their own production. Isn't that interesting? Now, perhaps that has something to do with mathematics behind the models and how those things are done. I don't really understand that. I haven't read the paper to any significant degree, but being able to use AI to review your work is a major advantage. And I've talked about this before. No matter what kind of work you are doing, being able to use AI to review the work that you've done is a really valuable asset. You can ask it to rate your work. You can ask it to help you improve it, identify opportunities for making it better. And this happens across the board. So if you're a researcher and you're trying to write a paper, you don't have to be worried about how it presents because you can leverage the AI to help make it better, whether that is writing it from the very beginning draft all the way to the review and the checking of sources. Yes, you can use AI to validate your sources. And I think one of the best examples of using AI in doing a review is actually if we talk about Google's model. If I go into Google and I'm using their AI capabilities, I've got all of their great AI experiments that they've been working on, but I can interact with Google's AI capability. If I bring up Gemini, it is a tool that I use on a regular basis. I think there's some really useful capabilities in Gemini that I like to use on a regular basis. My favorite feature actually right now is being able to connect to my email and it can find and surface relevant messages. But we can actually ask it to explain a difficult or complex topic. Let's go right back to the research paper example that we talked about. Let's do an analysis of scuba with Google Gemini. Scuba technology assessment. Now, I'm giving it a very simple prompt, but it's going to go and do the research. And what I like about Gemini, and look, all of these models have room for improvement depending on how you're looking at it. I think all of them have had a certain amount of controversy foisted upon them or that they brought upon themselves. But here's what I really love about Gemini. I can go in here and I can actually say to Gemini, hey, would you double check that response? And it's going to evaluate the output that Gemini has already given, and it's going to highlight and check what it gave me. And if it is validating the source, it's going to color it green. If it finds an error, it's going to color it red. And look at this. Isn't it interesting? It has actually found an error. Future developments focus on sustainable diving practices and minimizing environmental disturbances. That's not 100% true. So says Gemini about Gemini. These are the kinds of systems we need to be focused on building as we're using AI, because we can use AI to check AI. And we should be doing that with all of our work as well, because it can help us to reduce AI mistakes. That is, after all, why we're here on this channel. AI mistakes, so many different ways that we can color that, but let's keep moving because I think there's a few more details here that I'd like to get to before we wrap up the conversation. The next area that we should focus on is publication. Now, what does that mean? I think this is probably the biggest implication, and this is the one I want to spend the most time on. That's because what I've learned is in the world of AI, papers are being constantly produced. I saw something earlier this week that really struck me. And when we look at the implications on how people are affected by the use of technology, one of the things that we see is the number of jobs that we have today is going to be very different as a result of technological change. This chart falls off a cliff as it relates to agriculture. Why did this happen? Well, technology, and goes back to the tractor. The advent of the tractor really changed the number of people that were required to do the work of agriculture. Now, was this a bad change for the world? I would argue, on the whole, it was not. But if you were a farmer in the Dust Bowl, 1929 in the United States, that was a pretty rough time. There was a lot of change that had to happen all at once. And the reason that that change had to happen all at once was because of the speed of change. See, the production of those tractors kept accelerating. There were more and more of them. But there were also some external factors that brought about the change more rapidly. The Dust Bowl was one of them. There were some things that were happening economically that were also a challenge for the environment. But when it comes to the publication of papers, what we have seen is research and publication, in some cases, especially in academia, can take years. One of the examples Ethan used was, in some cases, he's worked on papers and research projects that have taken over a decade to complete. But with the AI being able to write the paper, do the analysis, review the paper, and even do reviews of the paper for publications for those people that are vetting the research and publishing it in a magazine or some other academic resource, the speed of publication is rapidly increasing. And I think that this is probably the biggest thing that we need to understand, because what we already know is that the speed of research enhances the speed of change for you and I, because the accessibility to that information is really vital. The faster we are able to learn and share information, the more rapid the change due to the technology that has evolved from that research is impacted upon us. Now, we do know that people don't like to change overnight. And that's where one of my most favorite quotes comes in. William Gibson is known to have said, "The future is already here. It's just not equally distributed." And that's probably one of my most favorite quotes, because what it means is that you and I have the opportunity to get ahead. What we're seeing today is anyone can go out to the archive site and read the latest AI papers. In fact, there's a newsletter and an account on X that I follow that publishes the links to the papers they think are most relevant or exciting in the AI space. It's provided through Hugging Face. And while I don't have as much time to read those papers as I'd like, I do check them on a regular basis to see what the latest is. And what's really great is that after a paper is published, I can then use AI to understand the paper. I don't have to be a researcher to be able to understand what it was that we learned from the research that was conducted. And it doesn't matter what level that publication is written at. I can use the AI to bring the paper to a level that I can understand. If it uses a term that I'm not familiar with, I can use an AI tool to understand that term so that I can have a deeper understanding of the paper. I can even have it summarize the entire paper in a few sentences. Now, you might argue that that's less useful than some would tend to think. I mean, summarization is a favorite use case of AI today, but you can't put into a paragraph what takes pages and pages of information to present. So there are limitations that apply even to brilliant AI systems that can summarize things. The net is that the pace of the change is going to increase even more than it already has, simply because we're able to share information like never before, publish it faster than ever, and validate whether or not it is true or significant, even faster. Isn't this exciting? I think this is absolutely incredible. There's so many amazing things that are happening as a result of AI helping us to communicate and understand what is being communicated on all sides. So what does that mean? I mean, what's next for what's going to happen in research? The truth is, we don't really know what's going to happen next. And I think that's something that Ethan is pointing out here. But this is the reason I started AI Mistakes. Ultimately, it's about the people. See, none of this stuff matters without you and I being a part of the discussion. So the question, the takeaway, the net of today's conversation is, how can you use these AI research paper evolutions to help you? It's about what you learn. It's about what you know. It's about enriching your mind, because it's always with you. So let's not miss the opportunity here to get ahead. We can learn from each other. We can share information like never before, and we can do it in totally new ways for learning, experimentation, and challenge. So here at AI Mistakes, I want to challenge you. Go out there, play with this technology. Go take advantage of what we have, right? If you haven't used Perplexity, I got to recommend it. It's really become my go-to source. It can do some really incredible research assisting, and I can organize it, unlike ChatGPT, which, don't get me wrong, I still use ChatGPT as well as Gemini, as well as Copilot and Anthropic. There's 5 or 6 more that I could talk about. But the more you can learn about the thing that you're interested in and find diverse ways to understand, the better off we're going to be. So let's go build those research papers, share what we've learned with the world. Yes, that too is one of the major changes. You may not even be aware of this, but I've been using Archive for quite a few years now to understand what's going on in the world. And what's really cool about this site is that anybody can publish anything. Garbage in, garbage out, of course. It is possible to publish paper that has not been peer reviewed. In fact, virtually all of the papers that you can see here, you might have to do a little bit of vetting yourself to understand how it was written, when it was published, who vetted it, is it real or valuable. But that's what's cool about the internet, right? We can share information. I can write a blog, or better yet, I can write an article with Perplexity and share that with the world, and anybody can benefit from that information. I'll bet that you have some insights, probably something that you know you need to be sharing, but you haven't. Let me encourage you. Don't wait. We have incredible tools at our disposal like never before. Now is the time to start. And if you're worried it's not good enough, use AI. Ask it how you can make it better, and then hit publish. That's what I do on this channel every week, and I got to tell you, it's fun. I'm enjoying this immensely. I'd love to hear from you if you're enjoying this. Go have a great week and go make some AI mistakes. We'll see you next time.